Welcome to another episode of our Neon Jazz interview series. Meet jazz trombonist Reggie Watkins. From West Virginia, he has gone on to travel all over the map, giving his unique blend of jazz to the world. He has plenty of experience touring with Maynard Ferguson and gave me one of the best jazz stories we have ever heard here on Neon Jazz. He also talks about his latest album, One for Miles, One for Maynard, along with a whole lot more. Please dig it, my friends.
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, man.
Thanks for calling. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, thank you for taking your time out. It's a pleasure. I love your music, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, thanks so much.
So I'm going to go ahead and start out. We're going to start in West Virginia here. How did growing up in West Virginia give you an appreciation for jazz?
Well, my mother loves music, and so she was always drawn to try to expose us to stuff like whatever was around there in West Virginia. I mean, the symphony, even ballets and music in the park and all that kind of stuff. So we were always, I had a church up there too, which involved a lot of music. So I was exposed to a lot of music. But then in high school, I got, I became aware of what was happening, as far as jazz, and so that it became an immediate shifting gears and just starting to listen and see myself as a jazz musician. So I was practicing, I was listening to music and practicing, and started to get, so we had a great band director who was really good about giving you something and let you run with it. He himself is not like a great jazz musician, but to say, okay, hey, this is what you need to listen to if you're into this.
Who did you listen to that blew your mind, that you were like, all right, this is it, this is my moment?
Well, J.J. Johnson blew my mind, but there were other people. I started getting put on to the music and all sides of the music, meaning like old stuff and straight edge stuff, also avant-garde, and I liked all that kind of stuff. So, J.J. Johnson was the kind of slap in the face for me.
Right on.
But also Miles Davis. I could just name so many artists who I just dealt with seriously, including one of the first people I was into was Doc Severinsen, because you could watch him every night on TV. Yeah. And then go and get the records, and then of course a lot of that stuff was recordings of remakes of basic things and stuff like that. So there's just a lot of music. Yeah, without a doubt. So after West Virginia, you went to Pittsburgh. You started playing there with Roger Humphreys and some other cats. What was that like to get into that kind of a scene? Well, when I was coming up, the first people we were aware of in terms of other musicians to look up to were the West Virginia musicians. Okay? And so, and then past that, then we became aware of the Pittsburgh scene. So to go there and to be around Roger Humphreys, we lived with Roger Humphreys and Gene Ludwig, Don DePaulis, all these great players up there as jazz greats, essentially, in our eyes. So to come up and get to play gigs with them was a dream come true in many ways, Coming to Pittsburgh. Jimmy Ponder was always, do you know who that is, Jimmy Ponder? Yeah. He was on the scene after he got back from New York, and he was like an uncle type, and just was always so warm and welcoming, and we would go to his house, and it was amazing to me to be around these musicians here, Yeah. So coming to Pittsburgh was like I said, a dream come true in many ways. With all these great cats around. Yeah, without a doubt. Why did you pick the trombone? Well, it's funny because I started. I played. I grew up. I played all these instruments growing up: piano, played the cello for a little bit, but then I got in band. I began to play the trumpet, and after I was on trumpet, I was then went and played the tuba. So then I became proficient for junior high or high school player on tuba, and then I entered high school. It was really me wanting to have a voice in jazz music, and that was I said, okay, now I want to be a trombone player. Yeah. Because it called to me. It picked me. The thing. Sure. You don't pick your instrument picks you. It felt that in a way.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I also have a great love for 5 secondary instruments, trumpet and piano. You know?
Right on. So you travel with Maynard Ferguson. That had to be a thrill for all those years.
Yeah, it was great.
What did he What did he teach you?
You know, a lot of things. He taught me a lot of things. You know, for instance, it's like Maynard had a very, he didn't like to make things too serious. He liked to keep it light on the bandstand. Although the music was being taken seriously, the attitude was, you know, it was supposed to be fun in what we were doing. But anything, you know, he was always able to do that and be positive and be a good influence on people. But at the same time, put the trumpet to his lips and completely serious. You know.
Yeah.
And that's just one point I'm making about how serious it is. I've seen him in horrible physical condition, and still play the gig. Yeah. I mean, I saw him in a wheelchair with a broken wrist, and he still played the gig. You know.
Wow.
And I had a lot of respect for that. You know, to see him in his 70s out on the road, and the road is rough, and especially if you're in your 70s. But just to see him, the dedication to it was incredible.
Yeah, that's great. What do you like? What do you like best about being a musician?
You can do what you love and make a living at the same time. That's not always a perfect scenario,
right?
But when you consider the other things that you could be doing, especially since, you know, musicians, we've fallen in love with the music and we're compelled to do it, and we see it as our calling. So to just have the opportunity, you know, that's why it's good when you find yourself becoming cynical to just realize that, you know, you've got it pretty good. Like Maynard used to say, we could be digging ditches right now. We could be pulling sheetrock off the back of a truck.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's important to remember that.
Without a doubt. So,
yeah, it's a blessing. I mean, especially, you know, some of the more lucrative things are not always the most creative things, but, you know, it all balances out.
Without a doubt. Well said. Well said. So, you've been at it for a while, playing live gigs, playing in front of crowds. How do you look at playing live today versus the way you did in the beginning when you were playing?
I think the older I've gotten, the further I've come. I think for all of us in jazz, just trying to be more of who we already are and let our instrument represent that. Being willing to have a connection with the audience and, for better or for worse, kind of lay your soul out for everybody to look at, you know, and it's the ability, the further you come, I think I feel like I've been able to accept that more and be able to just have an honest effort, a more honest effort. You know, it's like this lifelong journey of getting to know yourself and then continuously practicing.
Absolutely.
And then getting in front of the audience and letting it be its natural thing and you don't force it in any direction.
Your latest album, One for Miles, One for Maynard, it's a great album. I've really enjoyed listening to it. And I want to know what went into this. I know there's some obvious homages you're paying, but talk to me a little bit about this album.
Okay, so I used to be on the bus when I used to be with Maynard, and he would talk to me about, and he would talk to everybody about the experience that he had with other musicians. He was a storyteller. He's always telling stories. So he would talk about, everybody from, Don Rickles to, President, so many people, President Reagan, just the list is Frank Sinatra, so on and so forth. But he used to tell stories about a 6-month stint he had at Birdland.
Wow.
And that's fascinating me because they were alternating sets. So they would do these 45-minute sets all night. The last set started at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he alternated for 6 months with the Miles Davis Quintet.
Wow.
And I'm such a Miles fan that relationship, and he told some other stories in regards to his dealings with Miles, but that relationship and between him and Miles and the influence that they had on each other. Meaning, they're two trumpet players with mutual admirations, having conversations in New York at Birdland,
Yeah.
And being exposed to each other's music. So I thought that was really cool,
Absolutely.
So that always fascinated me, and I just wanted to honestly represent that on a record without thinking too much about what people think. I mean, it's just like, I don't know if it's the right thing to do it from a marketing perspective. It really doesn't matter. For me, it's like, I just wanted to tie those together, represent kind of my influences, honestly.
That's right. That's great.
There's two different kinds of musicians, almost a different instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So it sounds like you've had some wonderful teachers over the years that have taught you, and by osmosis, you have to be a teacher yourself when you gig with all of these younger guys. What do you like to teach them? What do you like to teach them about life and jazz?
A lot of younger musicians impress me. I mean, there's some great musicians out there, but I think I like to emphasize focus.
Yeah.
And it's focusing on the music and focusing on preparing for the music, because we're all like, the younger musicians are growing, they're dealing with things, they're hitting roadblocks and having successes, but you can get sidetracked by a lot having to make a living. So that focus is important. Whatever's going on in your day or your life, to be it when it's time and you have the opportunity to play, then you should give it your full attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shouldn't be 80%. It should have your full attention, regardless of if you're sick or you're tired or any of that kind of stuff, or if that's the time to do that and that only, and to be able to focus on that is when you really get the most out of it.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and kind of transition here. You to sit on a bus and to listen to someone like Maynard talk about someone like Miles has to be totally cool. So my question is this: is there anybody in the world of jazz that you would have loved to have met and had discussions like that with?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to just say just one, because I always regret not meeting Miles Davis. I got to meet Dizzy Gillespie, and that was great. I think Miles Davis would probably be the one for me.
What would you talk to him about?
I wouldn't want to let him determine what he wanted to talk about. The reverence, what he wanted to talk about. And that's the thing. A lot of times you learn by just hanging. That's about it. You hear a lot of musicians say the hang is important, because that's where
Yeah.
That's where the think tanks happen, and it might be, sitting in somebody's kitchen as they're making chicken, and just kind of observing everything about that.
Yeah.
And it might not have anything to do with music,
Who are some of your other jazz heroes? Who would you consider people that you totally look up to, whether they're modern players or players you listened to on albums when you were younger? Who do you consider jazz heroes?
Jazz heroes: Sonny Rollins, Chet Baker, Archie Shepp, Elvin Jones, John Coltrane, Keith Jarrett, Charles Mingus, Charlie Parker, obviously.
Yeah.
And in the trombone scheme, I mean, everything from J.J. Johnson to Albert Mangelsdorf to Gresham Kerr III, Svein Hampton, Curtis Fuller, Frank Rossellino, Fred Wesley. It's just, there's so much. There's so much to draw from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have a good jazz story that would be safe for the radio that you would like to dispense, that maybe happened on the road? Just a really good jazz story.
I don't know if I do. Maynard had some great stories that I heard him recount time after time, and those stories would change, as he told him, Oh, here's a good one. Here's a good one. So, Maynard Ferguson found himself living in Los Angeles. But he was on staff for Paramount Studios as a musician. And at the time, he was single, and he had a place in the Hollywood Hills. At some point, he became acquainted with a young lady that was known to be one of Frank Sinatra's girls. And meaning that it was one of his girlfriends that he kept, so to speak. Maybe he had an apartment for her, so on and so forth. I guess Maynard spent some time with her. And one day he's in his Hollywood Hills home practicing, and he gets a knock on the door. So he goes to the door, and at the door is this gigantic Italian man with a record in his hand. And he asked him to sign the record. So Maynard signs the record, and it says, okay, so what are you here for? He says, Frank sent me. And Maynard, his response was, Frank who? Knowing damn well who he was talking about.
Oh, my God.
And Maynard, he became irritated that Frank had sent somebody to his house. So immediately he started with the Frank who, you know. He said, now look, such and such, that's Frank's girl, and, you know, you should stay away. And looks at the guy and says, I tell you what, tell Frank to go bleep himself. And slams the door in the guy's face. Okay. So, what's to become of it? Fast forward to a television shoot for a Frank Sinatra special. And Maynard's in the band. He's in the studio. And he said, honestly, he was wondering what was going to happen. Because he knew he thought, well, what was I doing talking to this guy this way? And apparently then, the only exchange that they ever had after that was Frank came by and Maynard's there on stage and says, you got a lot of balls, kid. And that's all he got. And, you know, and Maynard he would tell stories about Timothy Leary and living on his compound. Amazing. Hanging with Charles Mingus there and just all these stories. So we were lucky to have that.
Yeah, that's awesome. The thing that's always very evident to me is that jazz musicians are very happy and fulfilled individuals that love what they do. And I always like to wonder and ask, what is it about the way you live your life that makes you happy?
I think with jazz musicians, there's many of them are intellectuals and they're politically aware, and at the same time, so there's different facets to jazz musicians. There's a lot of conversations you can have in jazz circles that wouldn't spawn in other circles. But you know, there's all those things, and just the depth of jazz musician personalities, and combined with the fact that they're fulfilling themselves. You know.
Yeah.
There's a sense of we're lucky to be able to do this. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, so if you're, and it's, you know, some people are loosely labeled jazz musicians, but the people I think of as jazz musicians, they have an awareness of things. You know, you can have candid conversations about the racial dynamic in this country, which runs parallel to the evolution of the music. And so you can have this conversation with jazz musicians because they're connected to all of that through the music, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's at the end of the day, we get to do what we love. I mean, it's an amazing thing. You see, you know, when the music is happening, everybody's smiling, and you carry that around.
Yeah, that's beauty, man. That's like the top level of Maslow's hierarchy, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, dig it.
So, Kansas City, Missouri, that's where we're out of. Have you played here?
Yes.
Where'd you play? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I played there with Maynard, and I also played there with Jason Mraz. I don't remember the venues, but then again, you know, with Maynard, a lot of times it was high schools.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I know for sure we played a couple of high schools in the Kansas City area.
Right on. Well, we're going through an extra special level of magic today after that Royals win yesterday, so it's...
well, congrats.
Yeah, there's some electricity in the air for sure. What is your future looking like? What do you have coming up? What's going on for you?
I'm basically, you know, I'm back in Pittsburgh. I lived in Austin, Texas for 4 years, and have moved back here mainly because I was drawn to the relationships in the music scene that were here from meaning the jazz scene. And I want to try to represent that to the best of my ability, whether that's recording or traveling, festivals, clubs, speaking engagements, anything that I can do to put kind of ourselves on the map and represent what we're doing here,
Yeah.
It's a very strong scene for its size, and you've got some great relationships here. There's people that have been playing together in different ensembles for many years. There's bass players and drummers and piano players that have been doing it together for 25 years, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
And it appeals to me rather than like the transient musicians that go from this to that, this to that. There's some things that can develop in a band setting that are very important. I did this record with that rhythm section that I have long-standing relationships with all those guys. So there's a trust there, and there's we share some core musical values. So I just value those things. I want to try to play as much as possible here in town and elsewhere, and just represent it.
Right on. So I'm going to throw out a metaphor for jazz right now. As a human being, we start out young, we gather our wisdom, we gather our experience, we grow old, and we always have this look. If you were to take jazz and go up and bump into the physical embodiment of jazz on the street today, how healthy would it be? How would it look? How vigorous? How strong would it be?
I think it would look incredibly healthy. I think we're on the verge of some things,
Mm-hmm.
The traditionalist view is that we're not, but when you really hear what's out there, it's pretty amazing. There's some different things happening, and I think jazz has got some great stuff ahead of us. Now, it's got to remain cultural. So if there's anything that I think is a misinterpretation of the music is when it loses its connection to the culture.
Yeah.
And that's one thing we have to watch, and the dangers of institutional learning. Jazz in schools can be very good, but in the wrong hands, it can also be. You can't. The blues is not a scale. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sure.
It is, but not primarily. So it's like you have to realize where it's coming from. It can't go off on its own. We have to somehow stay diverse and stay honest. Because when it becomes an academic study, then you're losing something there.
Yeah.
The great musicians. I think about Coltrane, and he had everything. He was technically proficient, virtuosic, but also very spiritual and very artistic as well. So there's always things that have to work together.
It's interesting. I interviewed Jimmy Heath several weeks ago, and he was talking about Coltrane, and he was talking about how he didn't compose a lot. He was more of a player, but he said Coltrane played, an ungodly amount of time a day. I mean, he was just a master at his instrument, so.
We always heard that coming up, it's like, okay, the story John Coltrane was practice and fall asleep literally with the saxophone in his mouth.
Yeah.
Practicing 12, 14 hours a day. That's what it takes,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Whatever talent you have to tag on time spent. You have to love your hours then.
That's right. That's totally right. I'm going to kind of come and funnel everything down to kind of an end here, and you've really painted some kind of Rockwellian images of being with Maynard on the tour bus, and I'm thinking 30 years from now, you're on a tour bus with a bunch of kids, you're an older fella. How do you want the world to remember you and your impact and how your music got infused into the annals of jazz history?
I see myself as, and would like for them to remember me, not necessarily as the best or the most whatever, but somebody who is a servant of the music, like you do your best. What we intend to do is our best to represent the music at the end of the day. It's not about reinventing the wheel, although it is about, pushing the envelope as much as possible. But I just want people to say that, look, he could play, he respected the music and the musicians, and he left us something to listen to. And it's pretty much that simple.
That is a great answer, and that's a great way to wrap things up. Reggie, man, I love your music, your energy. It's awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking some time out to talk with me today.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players laying down all that jazz. And thanks to Reggie Watkins for his time, stories, and his honesty. If you want to hear more interviews, please go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things neon jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.